It started with shouting. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words shot out like bullets, and I couldn't stop myself. We were having dinner, just another typical evening, him with his plate of food, me scrolling through my phone, and then I lost it. I didn't understand why I always felt so helpless, why I couldn't shake the feeling that I was out of place. I was so tired of it all. "You're such a piece of shit," I screamed. He looked up from his plate, clearly caught off guard, but I couldn't stop. My anger was spilling over, and once it started, it didn't stop. I didn't even care how loud I was anymore. "You act like I don't do anything. Like I'm just here, invisible, while you control everything." I was shaking with frustration, the tension in my chest unbearable. He looked at me, his face frozen, like he didn't know what to say. His silence just made me angrier. "Why do you always have to remind me of how useless I am?" I shouted. "I try. I fucking try, and all you do is sit there, acting like I'm a problem." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. I could see his face starting to shift, the hurt in his eyes, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed him to understand. I needed him to see the pain I was carrying. Instead, he just stared at me, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. I could feel my chest tightening, but the anger kept flowing. Finally, he stood up, slowly, like he was trying to calm himself, but all I could hear was the ringing in my ears from the chaos I'd just unleashed. "I didn't mean to," he started, but I didn't want to hear it. "Just say something. Do you even care about me anymore?" I demanded, barely holding back tears. But he didn't answer. He didn't say anything. He just walked away, the silence between us louder than any argument we'd ever had. That night, the tension between us was thick. She was already asleep when I crawled into bed, facing away from me. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, wondering what all of this meant for us. For me. Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe she had a point. The next morning, things were eerily quiet. She moved around the house as though nothing had happened, her tone neutral when she asked if I wanted coffee. But her eyes never met mine. I declined, choosing instead to watch her as she went about her morning. I couldn't stop thinking about her words, suffocating puppet. If she truly felt like that, then maybe I'd been blind to something much bigger. If she wanted independence, I decided I would give it to her. Not out of anger, but with cold, calculated resolve. I wasn't going to make a spectacle of it. No ultimatums, no big speeches. Just subtle shifts. Small changes to test her words. She left for work, and I lingered behind, sipping my coffee, mentally running through our routines. There was a bill due today, one I would usually pay without thinking, but this time I left it untouched. If independence was what she wanted, she'd handle it. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, she came home and mentioned the water heater was acting up again. Normally, I would have already been on my way to the garage, tools in hand, but this time I stayed seated. "Maybe you should call someone to take a look at it," I said, keeping my tone casual. She looked at me, surprised. "I thought you'd just fix it. I figured you might want to handle it," I replied, nonchalantly. For a moment, she just stared at me, then nodded, almost to herself, and walked off to call a plumber. Over the next few days, I continued to pull back in ways that felt unnatural. Things I normally took care of, filling up the car, picking up groceries, were left to her. She handled them, but not without a look or a comment that hinted at her growing frustration. One evening, she finally asked, "Is something going on? You've been different." I shrugged, pretending to be engrossed in my laptop. "I just thought it might be nice to step back a little. You said you didn't want me micromanaging, so I'm trying to give you some space." She didn't press the issue, but her expression shifted. It wasn't a question anymore. She was just tired. Tired of me, tired of everything. The next few days unfolded with the same silent tension, each of us holding on to our positions, as if we were playing a game neither of us truly understood. She was handling everything, yes, but I could see the strain in her eyes. There was frustration, anger even, but mostly exhaustion. The bills piled up on the counter, the laundry sat untouched, and the house began to feel less like a home and more like a battleground where we both fought, but not with words, just with actions, or lack thereof. Then came a moment that seemed so trivial at the time, but it stood out to me like a flashing red light. The trash had piled up in the kitchen. Normally, I would have taken care of it without a second thought. But this time, I left it there, letting it sit, waiting to see if she would notice. Of course, she did. I watched her walk into the kitchen, glance at the trash, and then move toward the sink. Her lips tightened, but she didn't say anything. She just grabbed her coffee and left the house, leaving the trash where it was. The silence that followed was deafening. Later that evening, I received a text from her. "Did you pay the internet bill? It's due today." I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I respond? Should I help? Instead, I typed, "Nope. The folder's in the kitchen. You've got it." Her reply was brief and curt. "Fine." The day went on, and I could feel the tension mounting. She came home that evening looking more drained than usual. She tossed her bag under the couch and immediately opened her laptop. I stayed out of her way, watching as she sorted through a mountain of overdue tasks. I had expected her to ask for help, but she didn't. She just kept working, even though it was obvious she was struggling. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I thought I had a moment to break the silence, to ask her how she was doing. But I didn't. Instead, I let her sit there, eating in silence, barely acknowledging my presence. We were both too stubborn to be the first one to speak. Finally, the breaking point came when she asked, "Why didn't you respond to the emails from the insurance company? You've always handled this." I could hear the frustration in her voice, but I didn't let it show on my face. "What emails?" "The ones about renewing our car insurance." She snapped. "They've been sending reminders for weeks. Now, they're saying the policy expired, and I have to figure out how to reinstate it. They're charging us extra fees because we missed the deadline." I shrugged nonchalantly. "You have their number. It shouldn't be too hard to fix." I watched her face drain of color as she processed what I said. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, grabbing her laptop and storming off to the dining table. Her frustration was palpable as she furiously typed, navigating an endless series of customer service calls, trying to resolve the issue. I sat there, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. This was the moment I had been waiting for, her independence, her freedom to handle it all. But watching her struggle like this didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. It felt uncomfortable, like I had pushed her too far. Later that night, she came into the kitchen, looking defeated, and said, "This isn't independence. This is sabotage." I stood there, leaning against the doorway, my mind racing. "I'm not sabotaging you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just giving you what you wanted. You said you felt suffocated. Fine, now you're in control. But control comes with responsibility." Her eyes filled with anger. She looked at me, her chest heaving with frustration. "You don't get it, do you? You spent so much time being the one in control that you don't see what it feels like to have everything dumped on you all at once." I was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. "You think I don't know what that feels like?" I said, my voice hardening. "I've been the one carrying the load for years, making sure everything works smoothly while you got to do whatever you wanted." "You think I didn't notice?" She shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "Of course I noticed, but I didn't ask for you to take over everything. You chose to do that, and now you're punishing me for it." I felt a cold, hollow feeling settle in my chest. I didn't have a response. Not one that would fix it. Not one that would make her feel better. Instead, I said, I didn't know how to let go. The conversation ended there, but the silence that followed was unbearable. We didn't speak much after that. Every day felt heavier than the last, and we moved around each other like strangers in our own home. Days passed in this suffocating silence, with each of us carrying the weight of our unspoken frustrations. I stayed firm in my decision to let her handle things on her own, to give her the independence she said she wanted. But the more I saw her struggle, the more I began to question whether I had gone too far. That was until one evening when everything came crashing down. She came home late, her shoulders slumped as she carried takeout bags, an unusual move for her. She usually made a point of cooking, but not tonight. She set the bags down on the counter and looked at the stack of unopened mail. "Have you gone through these?" she asked, her voice tired, with a trace of frustration. "No," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I figured you'd handle it." Her eyes snapped up to mine, and for the first time in days, she looked at me directly. "Seriously?" she said, her voice sharp. How long are you going to keep this up? I sat up from the couch, meeting her glare with the calmness I didn't fully feel. Keep what up? She threw her hands in the air. This. You've been acting like you're some passive observer while everything falls apart around us. I'm not acting, I said quietly. I'm giving you the space you wanted. Space, she scoffed. This isn't space. This is you abandoning everything because I said I didn't want to feel like a puppet. I was silent for a moment. You want to control, I said slowly, and now you have it. But control comes with responsibility. She shook her head, her anger flaring. You don't get it, do you? You're not giving me control. You're punishing me. Her words stung. But I didn't flinch. I'm not punishing you, I said firmly. I'm showing you what it looks like when I step back. You wanted to be in control? Now you are. She stared at me, her expression a mixture of anger and something else. You don't understand, she said quietly. You spent so long being the one in control that you don't know what it feels like to have it all fall on you. I do know, I replied, my voice low. I've been the one carrying everything. You just never saw it. The conversation ended there, but the silence between us was louder than anything we had said. She didn't say a word to me the next morning. When I woke up, she had already left for work, and the house was quieter than usual. On the kitchen table, there was a stack of bills and a notebook with a sticky note. Can we go through these together tonight? I stared at the note, a small but significant gesture. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tiniest crack in my resolve. We had made progress, but the road ahead was still unclear. That evening, she came home, looking tired but determined. She walked into the kitchen and saw me sitting at the table with a pile of papers. We both paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. Thank you for sitting down with me, she said, her voice softer than it had been in days. I nodded, feeling the tension between us ease just slightly. For the first time in a while, we were on the same side, working through the mess together. We didn't have all the answers, but we were starting to find our way again. The next few days passed in a tentative peace, neither of us fully comfortable, but both trying to make things work. The air between us, though still thick with unspoken words, felt less hostile, more like a slow thaw. Every now and then, we would catch each other's eye, and in those moments, something unspoken passed between us. Regret, maybe, but also the smallest flicker of hope. We continued sorting through the practical matters, the bills and tasks that had piled up during our silent standoff. We both knew that the tension wasn't gone. Not yet, but at least we were trying to rebuild the connection we had lost. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was something. One evening, I sat down to dinner, and this time the table felt different, less like a battleground, more like a place where we could, maybe talk. We ate in near silence, but this time the quiet wasn't suffocating. There was a peace, though fragile, lingering in the air. Thank you for doing this, she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, and there was a quiet sincerity in it that made me pause. I looked up from my plate. Doing what? Trying, she replied. I know I've been difficult, and you've been distant. But you're trying now, and that means something. I didn't know what to say to that, so I simply nodded. There were still so many things left unsaid, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like we were just waiting for the next argument to erupt. The next few weeks weren't smooth sailing. Far from it. We had our moments. Small arguments over trivial things, silent standoffs when the tension got too much. But there were also moments of clarity, small moments where we started to see each other again. I began to realize just how much I had taken her for granted. And she started to see that maybe she hadn't been as clear about what she needed as she thought. One evening, I found myself sitting across from her on the couch, both of us reading our own books. There was no dramatic declaration, no sweeping gesture, just a quiet realization that maybe we were okay. She looked up from her book, catching my eye, and for a moment, everything between us felt simpler. I know I haven't been perfect, she said, her voice almost hesitant, but I'm willing to try. For us. That simple statement, more than anything, made me feel like there was still a chance for us. I didn't have all the answers, and I knew she didn't either. But maybe that was okay. We didn't need to fix everything right now. We just needed to keep trying. I reached out, touching her hand gently. I'm willing to try too. It wasn't the perfect resolution, and I didn't expect it to be. But it was a start. Slowly, we began to rebuild. Not the way we had been, but something new, something that could work for both of us. The following months weren't without their challenges, but we faced them together. Little by little, we learned how to share the load, how to listen to each other without judgment, how to let go of the control we had both clung to for too long. And as we sat there, together, on that couch, it occurred to me that maybe the key to making it work wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about learning to give each other the space we needed while still being there when it mattered. Our story isn't over, not by a long shot, but it's better now because we're both willing to keep moving forward together.